Let's talk about the heir apparent at quarterback. Should we have big expectations for Dante Moore?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. We've got Dante Moore talk. We've got portal chatter. How many guys from the portal will be high-impact players? It won't be all of them. The trick is figuring out who goes into which particular camp. And Dana Altman was not happy. He should not have been. I'm happy, though, that this episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Dante Moore looks like he is going to be the starting quarterback. This hasn't officially been declared. It's just the impression that we've all gotten based on two factors, really. Number one, he was, by a couple of different services, the top quarterback in his class coming out of high school in 2023 and transferred to Oregon after a struggling freshman season down at UCLA, presumably to sit behind a veteran quarterback and learn and then become the starter for 2025. That's data point number one. Data point number two is several players, Trayshawn Holden and others, have expressed their support for Dante Moore on Twitter as they have played their final game as an Oregon Duck, saying this guy's going to be great. You don't understand how good he's going to be, gassing him up, and you love to see that, of course. I really don't take that much stock in it other than that's the guy I expect to be the starting quarterback, because if it was a legitimate battle and they didn't know, I feel like Austin Novosad, we'll talk about in a moment, it would have gotten a little bit more mention than what we saw in the messages from those players. But my expectations for Dante Moore are pretty measured going into the 2025 season. Now, do I understand how high his ceiling is? Yeah, mega talent. I mean, if he maximizes his potential either this year or next year, Oregon could be even better at the quarterback position than they were this past year with Dillon Gabriel. He has a higher ceiling than Gabriel did because he has better physical traits. He is bigger, he is taller, he has got a better arm. That doesn't mean Gabriel wasn't good. I saw the numbers this year. He wasn't a Heisman finalist by accident. Dillon Gabriel was great. Dante Moore has a higher ceiling. He does also, however, have a significantly lower floor. And we saw that floor when he was playing for UCLA. So in 9 games that he appeared in as a Bruin, as a true freshman, he completed 53.5% of his passes. He threw for 179 yards a game. He threw 11 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. I believe 3 of those interceptions were pick sixes. And that ultimately led to his benching. He started as the backup, then he won the job, then he lost the job, then he transferred to Oregon, Chip Kelly left, and everything kind of fell apart down there. So, Dillon Gabriel this past season for the Ducks completed 73% of his throws. That was a career high. He threw for 275 yards a game. That was actually lower than what he threw for at Oklahoma last year on a per average basis. And his touchdowns to interception numbers were identical to his last season at Oklahoma, albeit in a few more contests because he played 12 games at Oklahoma and 14 this year for the Ducks. But 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Dillon Gabriel was exactly what I expected him to be when he transferred in for the Ducks. But for Dante Moore, I expect to see, after having sat for a year and Will Stein coming back as Oregon's offensive coordinator, which I'm a fan of, by the way, I certainly expect Dante Moore to put up better numbers. He'll have a better support system around him, and he'll just be more mentally mature than he was as a true freshman, hopefully not turn the ball over as much as he did that year. So I fully have that expectation that he progresses. But do I think Dante Moore hits his ceiling in year 1? Probably not. Most quarterbacks don't. Marcus Mariota's first season starting was his second year of college football, by the way. He essentially did what Dante Moore just did and, redshirted for a year. And then Mariota started. And in 2012, Mariota was great. But if you compare 2012 Mariota to 2014 Mariota, who won the Heisman Trophy, they are both really, really good players. 2014 Mariota is a significantly better player. So I'd say overall, if, Mariota 2014 or Bo Nix 2023, if that's a 10 out of 10 Oregon quarterback season, and those are statistically, I believe, the two best seasons by an Oregon quarterback of all time. If that's 10 out of 10, my expectation for Dante Moore, it's like a 7, maybe a 7.5 out of 10 in that sort of range. He's got the ability to give a 10 out of 10 season. But in your first year as a full-time starter, first full season, because remember, he started some games at UCLA, but not all of them. I expect there to be a progression. I expect there to be a learning curve. And if he completes 73% of his passes next year, that'd be fantastic. If passing-wise he is the same as Dillon Gabriel was this year, maybe take away the red zone interceptions, boy, that would blow me away. And then I'd be wildly optimistic about what he can do for 2026 if he decides to come back, which I suspect he would. But the reason that my expectations for him are not to have, a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10 sort of season. I'd say Gabriel this past year was probably somewhere around an 8.5, 9 out of 10, is because I saw where he was starting from a couple of seasons ago. There's always an adjustment. There's always a learning curve, particularly at the quarterback position. Do I have bigger expectations for him because he sat for a year than I would have if he started this past season for the Ducks? Yes, absolutely. But he still has plenty of things to learn. This is probably going to be the least productive quarterback season that Dan Lanning has had in his time as Oregon's head coach, because he's got a younger guy who has got all the talent in the world. But I am not placing the weight of the world on his shoulders and expecting him to just suddenly blossom into the player that he was always capable of becoming when Oregon first recruited him out of high school, just because, there are some highlights flying around on Twitter. He's going to have Decorian Moore to throw the football to, who is absolutely absurd. But I know what Dante Moore's potential is. I just haven't forgotten about what the other side of him is, and that has to be coached out of him. Not just in practice, but in games as well. So that leads me to this mailbag question that came in from Daffy. What is the percentage chance Novosad starts over Dante Moore? Boy, with the amount of support that came from players for Moore specifically, I'd put it at less than 5%. It might even be less than 2%. But what I've said this for a long time. Novosad was the biggest surprise, really the biggest story coming out of the spring game last year. He made one bad decision that resulted in an interception, and Dante Moore, as we know, is not immune to bad decisions on the football field. I've seen it happen several times, and hopefully Will Stein and company can remedy that. Novosad and Moore did just about everything the same. I mean, the throws they both look great, by the way. But if you go back and watch the throws that Novosad made in that game, he made some high-level throws all over the field. So did Dante Moore. Now, Dante has a little bit more arm talent. He can drop the angles down easier. I think his release is smoother and a little bit quicker than Novosad's. But this is not the NFL. This is college. It's about productivity, not about traits. So, I'll put it at 3%. 3% based on what we have seen so far and what the expectation is. But am I down on Austin Novosad? Absolutely not. You never need a backup quarterback right until you do. But are you feeling more optimistic than me? I'm not down on Dante Moore. I don't know. These things always get misinterpreted. So you interpret it however you like. I know how I feel about Dante Moore, but I want to know how you feel. So let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at @SMcLaughlinCFB. So, is every player that comes to Oregon via the portal going to be a high-impact guy? Answer, no, they are not. But the answer is yes to the question, should you check out Prize Picks? They're bringing you this message. The place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to enjoy all the football action. Now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players and their stat projections, and if your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, 1,000 times your money, just by making a few simple picks. So if you watch the NFL playoffs and say, I know who's having a big game, I know who's going to be down, you go put your money where your mouth is with Prize Picks. Are you ready to run your game this football season? Hope so. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. So recently on the show, I did a segment breaking down how many high-impact players you find in a recruiting class of 20 to 29 kids for Oregon over the last couple of seasons. The answer is anywhere from 4 to 8. And other guys can make a modest impact, show up here or there, but you're trying to kind of sift through and figure out which guys are going to translate, which guys are going to pop. And this question came in from Darius P257, who wants to know, how does it look with the transfer portal guys? I think that's a great question, Darius. And if you want to submit a question, drop it in the YouTube comments below, hit me up on Twitter, or become a Locked On Ducks insider. You get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. That link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. So here's how it goes down. Oregon's had 3 transfer portal classes. I'm not counting 2025 yet since they haven't taken the field. So in 2022, Oregon brought in 10 transfers. 7 of them were guys I'd consider to be high-impact players. The guys who weren't, Caleb Chapman, wide receiver from Texas A&M, I believe only logged fewer than 5 snaps. Adam Berry and Andrew Boyle, who were both specialists, and Boyle, of course, was on the team this past year, was Oregon's long kicker, but neither guy was a huge factor when it came to Oregon winning football games on a weekly basis. So, 10 transfers, 7 high-impact guys. 2023, 16 total transfers, 10 of them were high-impact guys. They brought in a long snapper in Colson Brunner, who appeared in 2 games. Nishad Strother came over but was hurt, so he didn't play. Junior Anguilau also had an injury concern but never saw the field consistently. Connor Soley came over from Arizona State and was mostly a special teams guy. Casey Kelly was the number 3 tight end. And Caden Ludwig is a guy who I can't remember a play that he actually made for the Ducks. I'm sure he got on the field here and there, but he came over from Colorado, did not make an impact there. So 16 transfers, 10 high-impact guys. 2024, you had 14 transfers come over. 8 of them were high-impact players, guys like Dillon Gabriel or Kobe Savage or Evan Stewart, or you can keep going down the list. The guys who were not high impact for the season, Matthew Bedford, Jay Harris, Cam Alexander, Cruz Rushing, Elijah's brother, Peyton Woodyard, who was technically a transfer, technically a high school recruit. He transferred as a true freshman. College football is weird. And then Dante Moore, of course. None of those guys were contributing to Oregon in a significant way this year. So that's 3 seasons where, and some of those guys played multiple years, right? Like Strother was not a high impact guy in 23, obviously a hugely impactful guy in 2024. But that's 7 to 10 players over a 3-year average. To be exact, 8.3 on average. Why don't we round that down and say 8, since you can't really have a third of a player out there on the football field. And when you hear discussions about how many transfers Oregon brings in, it's just all transfer, it's just this and whatnot. Guys who come in and make an impact right away, 8 on average. Everything else has been high school players. Now, some of those guys, again, have played for multiple seasons, right? Bucky came over in 2022, and he was a big impact player in 2023 as well. But you're still looking at a number that doesn't comprise a 22-man roster plus rotational players. You need 30 or so guys that can be quality starters, high impact players for the Ducks year in, year out. It's not all coming through the transfer portal. So Oregon has currently added 9 transfer portal players in the class of 2025, many of whom I expect to be high impact. Mekhi Hughes, the running back from Tulane, yeah, that's probably Oregon's leading rusher next year. Probably. Most likely there. Then there's a guy like Malik Benson, the wide receiver who comes over from Florida State. I could see him getting beat out by other guys on the depth chart. I could also see him being a veteran who is waiting for the opportunity to actually be properly supported by, having a big role in the offense that is actually capable offense. I mean, he was going to be a big impact guy at Florida State, but they couldn't throw the football. Their offense was completely and totally inept. They fired their offensive coordinator. They fired another offensive assistant, and they're moving on from DJU at quarterback, who's going to the NFL draft, and I'll just leave that statement for whatever it is. So I don't think that everyone is necessarily going to be an immediate high-impact sort of guy. I mean, Alex Harkey's coming over from Texas State. On paper, it looks like he might be one of the tackle starters. Maybe Janoris Wilson is better. A guy who they've recruited and developed over the last couple of years, which I hear on Twitter, Oregon can't do. Yeah, it's always been a ridiculous notion. So that's how the transfer portal players break down. 7 high-impact guys in 22, 10 in 23, 8 in 24. They've currently brought in 9. There's not going to be a 100% hit rate on guys transferring and then immediately being huge parts of the Oregon football team in that particular season. Most will. You're over 50% in each one of those years, 10 out of 16, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 14, but you're never close to 100%. So we'll see how such things play out. This question came from Moody Man. Question for the pod. Some context, though. I think the next year or two is when we really start to see Oregon's recruiting in the last few cycles pay off. For my question, I think the playing as a true freshman is always tough. Yes, playing as a true freshman is tough. But who do you think is the true freshman from the last recruiting class that has the best chance to play on both sides of the ball next year? Besides Dacorian Moore, he's a beast. Well, I mean, okay. My guesses are on offense, Vander Plug because of the depth. My sleeper pick, Jordan Davison. And on defense, it's got to be Offord or Finney. Thanks, Spence. So, I mean, you took what is looking more and more like the top answer. But Dacorian Moore, that is. I don't know how he's not playing a role for the Ducks next year. I really don't. I think he comes in and just replaces Tez Johnson right away. The catch he made, if you didn't see the catch he made, just go YouTube it or look it up on Twitter. It is literally an Odell Beckham Jr. Sunday Night Football level catch. It is one of the craziest things. His yards after catch, like he's not like everybody else. He really is not. Oregon has had some crazy talented wide receiver recruits over the last couple of cycles. None of them are like him. None of them. Not even Jurion Dickey. None of them are like this guy. He is the number one receiver in the class for a reason. He's an absolute monster out there. So offensively, if I can't choose him, I actually would have gone. I would have gone with Vander Plug as well, because tight end has been the position that's the easiest to play as a true freshman for whatever reason. Sadiq did, Terrence Ferguson did, Maliki Matavau did. It's a spot where you can come in and play right away. And with the injury and ongoing recovery of Roger Saliapaga, I don't know who Oregon's number 3 tight end is at the moment next year. They bring in Jamari Johnson from Louisville to back up Kenyon Sadiq, but this is a team that plays as much 13 personnel as anybody in the country, 1 back and 3 tight ends. So, I like your picks there. Defensively, though, man, it is tough. Even for guys as talented as Trey McNutt or Naeem Offord or Dorian Brew, any of these guys that, are really highly rated defensive backs, or, a guy like Brandon Finney as well. I would say the safety position is the one that is the most likely to see a true freshman there. Whether Offord makes the switch or McNutt is ready to go, those would be the guys where I would lean towards. But I think I want to go back to the first part of your question where you say, I think the last couple of recruiting classes will really, start to show up. I fully agree. Because Oregon has had players from the past recruiting classes transfer out. That's completely normal. They still haven't had a starter transfer away in Lanning's 3 years, which is something he's proud of. He should be. That's a pretty darn solid feat, and not every place has been able to say that. I mean, Georgia just had their starting quarterback transfer to Miami, for goodness sake. So it's not, no, there were off-field considerations there as well. But still, I look at what Oregon's done the last couple of classes. I think you're going to see a lot of new faces that have been waiting their turn. Not exclusively, because some guys, yeah, they might be deprived of an opportunity to play because they brought in a transfer at that particular position. But end of the day, I wonder if Dillon Austin doesn't have a bigger role if the legal situation gets sorted out. Or Roderick Pleasant, maybe he's a guy that slides into that nickel position and rotates in there, and maybe they like Theron Johnson on the outside, maybe they don't. I don't know. There are a lot of options there in the second year. I think the linebacker position is one where you're going to see at least one, if not two, young guys that have not seen a big role before play a significant role next year. Jerry Mixon, Braden Platt, Kamar Mathuti, Dylan Williams. Somebody in that room is going to be the number 3 linebacker. And we saw 4, really 3.5. Jacobs had a reduced role at the end of the year, but he was still there. Someone's going to be in that spot. Defensive line, same sort of thing. So I'm more on the 23 and 24 classes will have names that'll pop up and become key players more than we'll see a bunch of true freshmen, take the field here in 2025. It's just hard. It's really hard to play as a true freshman. It's also hard to win basketball games in the Big Ten. Dana Altman learned that. Dana was furious after the game. Not happy. And I understand why. First, a reminder of this episode brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Do you want to see Ohio State win because it might make you feel better, or lose because it might make you feel better? Guess what? They're favored by 8.5 points against Notre Dame. And not to brag, but I have been 3-0 picking the point spread of Notre Dame games in the playoff this year. And I'm going with the Buckeyes. I think they win 28-13 and cover that number. So the FanDuel app, easy to navigate. They've got a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Oregon had a big opportunity against Purdue, and they unfortunately couldn't get it going offensively. 65-58, the final. The inverse of the Illinois game where they couldn't defend. Oregon was absolutely outstanding on defense. Purdue's 2 leading scorers did most of their damage at the free throw line. Trey Kaufman ran on 23 points. Braden Smith had 15. Those guys had 14 combined made free throws. Kaufman-Renn was 7 of 20 from the floor. Smith was 5 of 15. Nate Biddle had 6 blocks. This was a great defensive game for Oregon. I am not throwing in the towel by any stretch of the imagination. I know it is disappointing. Shout out to the crowd and everybody that showed up. The environment was really good. It needs to continue being that. And Oregon's got Washington coming up on Tuesday, I believe. And that's a game that Oregon really needs to win. You got to have a bounce back there against a Washington team that has not been very good. But this is basketball in the Big Ten. It's hard. It is hard to win on the road, at home, wherever. Like Purdue is playing really, really good ball. Matt Painter is an excellent coach, but Oregon's offense in this game was bad. So Matt Prame had tweeted out a couple of these quotes. He said, Prame did, that Dana Altman is livid. He first blamed himself and the coaching staff, but he said the team didn't execute the game plan on offense and all went rogue. He is upset he didn't pull guys. Dana Altman later had a quote that went like this, quote, "I'll tell you what, we're a poorly coached team. That was 16 turnovers, leaving our feet fundamentally not sound, and the shot selection was awful. Really disappointed in myself to not get our guys to execute what we wanted." Now, Dana Altman is falling on the sword there because he's a veteran head coach. He understands how it needs to be, and he's an adult in the room, and he can handle that sort of stuff. If you go watch the press conference, Dana Altman is mad because I think he did coached the guys to be ready for that game, and they just didn't execute. To say that, guys were going rogue offensively and not executing the game plan and such, is that on coaching? Yeah, should have made some more adjustments during the game, perhaps. He said he's upset he didn't pull guys. Okay, I get that. But sometimes the guys just got to go out there and be better than they were, and they just weren't very good. So Oregon shot 29 three-pointers in this game. They only made 7 of them. They were 11 of 21 on 2-point field goals and 15 of 17 at the line. But they put up 58 points at home. Now, Purdue is an incredibly well-coached defensive team. Full credit to the Boilermakers here. Apparently, this Big Ten basketball season is just the football revenge tour. Who's beaten Oregon this year? UCLA, Illinois, Purdue. Oregon beat all of those teams by a lot on the football field. So, maybe it's that. Maybe it's just the law of averages coming around and whatnot. But it is certainly disappointing that all 3 of Oregon's losses have come at home. However, none of those losses go down as quote-unquote bad losses. You can say disappointing, missed opportunities, 100%. Even the Illinois game. Yeah, they didn't defend very well. But Illinois hit a bunch of shots. They hit a lot of really tough threes. Sometimes you're going to run into a team that does that, and Illinois is really good. A bad loss is if you had lost to Portland, which they could have done at home earlier this year, or in the past when they would lose to bad Cal teams or Stanford. Like those are the games that so far Oregon has avoided. That's very encouraging. Very encouraging. This is still a really good team. By the way, Alabama just went to Kentucky and won and was solidly the better team for probably 35 of the 40 minutes that they played. Oregon's got to win against Alabama. Oregon's got to win against Texas A&M as well, who's really good. The ceiling on this Oregon team hasn't changed. So, yes, this is a missed opportunity for Oregon to pick up a win, because are you going to go to West Lafayette and beat Purdue? Probably not. You're probably not going to do that. They could, but probably not. So, it's a missed opportunity for Oregon to have another victory that would continue to keep them in the discussion for a 1 or 2 seed. Lunardi's last bracket projection had them as a 3 seed. I don't think this drops them out of that. They would fall a little bit if they lose to Washington, because Washington is not very good. But what I really liked about this game is that Oregon was awesome defensively. And Dana said as much. He liked their effort, intensity. They did a lot of good things. I mean, they had 7 block shots, 1 from KJ Evans and 6 from Nate Biddle, who is just a really good basketball player all around. Both ends of the floor. He had 18 points in this game, but only 2 rebounds. And Oregon was -5 on the glass, and they were -4 in turnover margin. That's what this game came down to. They couldn't get shots when they needed to. They were taking too many threes. Yeah, they struggled in a couple areas, but the defense has at times not been where it has needed to be. In the last couple of games, I have seen signs of growth in that area, and that's been a hallmark of Dana Altman teams, is they get better as the season goes on, not because the offense changes, because the defense usually changes. So that's something I will be watching for as they progress, but Oregon is sitting at 15-3. All 3 losses are in conference play. They still have a lot of games left, but they have Washington, then they go at Minnesota, at UCLA, and host Nebraska. By Big Ten basketball standards, that is a favorable stretch. And the key will be not forcing up as many 3. 7 of 29. You got to figure out a way to make the offense just easier to play. It looks so hard, and Purdue is really good, but there wasn't ever an adjustment there during the game. So Dana and the guys have to be able to make that adjustment there. But if they keep playing like this defensively, I feel confident they can go through that stretch and win at least 3 of their next 4 games. And if they do that, I will be pretty happy, and I think they will keep where their seeding is at right now. Then they hit a tougher stretch, Michigan State, both on the road, both of whom are really good. They do not go to Purdue, by the way. It's Northwestern, Rutgers, Iowa, at Wisconsin. That'll be tough. USC, Indiana, then at Washington. So Missed opportunity, but nothing calamitous here for Oregon hoops. It is all good. Not every game goes your way, and the Big Ten is really good. The SEC is really good, and Oregon's got those 2 SEC wins. Alabama and Texas A&M continue, and USC's been playing better as well. Those wins are going to keep boosting Oregon's resume. So, I would really like for this team to be able to manage a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's typically who makes up the Final Four. They're on track to do that. But what they have to really avoid is don't let this one loss become something that allows it to snowball. Like Washington, must-win game because you're going to go on the road for the next 2 games after that. You cannot lose 2 in a row at home. Can't ever happen. I don't care who you're playing. Can't do it. Especially when you're playing a Washington team that is towards the bottom of the Big Ten Conference standings right now. And it's the Huskies. You got to beat the Huskies. Like, come on. So, get a bounce back on Tuesday. I will be just fine. No panic, no alarm, no nothing of that sort here for Dana's squad. Just, that's a missed opportunity to really, really climb for one of those top seeds. But still, I expect Oregon, if they keep playing the way that they are capable of, to be a top 4 or 5 seed when the NCAA tournament rolls around. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.